Beer. We think we know it, right? It's one of the oldest, most popular drinks on the entire planet. But what if I told you that the story we've all heard, the one with monks and German purity laws, is just a tiny piece of the puzzle? The real history of beer is so much older and way more surprising than you could possibly imagine.
What if the story of beer isn't really about men with beards? What if its true home wasn't some chilly monastery in Europe, but actually under the blazing sun of the ancient Middle East? And what if the very first master brewers weren't even men? Yeah, the image we all have in our heads is pretty clear, right? A monk, maybe a German brewmaster, or some guy at a modern craft brewery. But the reality, for thousands of years, looked a lot more like this. An ancient woman in a place called Sumer creating this sacred, essential drink for her entire community. And that is where our story really kicks off.
All right, so let's jump in our time machine. We're going way back to the very beginning to find out where this all got started.
Okay, so here we are, Mesopotamia, the land nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This is where humanity basically invented writing, cities, agriculture, the whole shebang. And, as it turns out, this is where they perfected beer. We found chemical evidence of brewing here that dates back over 5,000 years.
You see, for the Sumerians, beer wasn't just something to kick back with. They called it sakaru, which literally means liquid bread. And that's exactly what it was for them, a core part of their diet, absolutely packed with nutrients. It was so essential that it was given as daily wages to laborers, even the workers building the Great Pyramids over in Egypt.
Okay, so how on earth do we know how they made this stuff? Well, incredibly, they left us the recipe. But it wasn't tucked away in some ancient cookbook. No, it was hidden inside a 4,000-year-old song, a hymn of praise to a goddess.
And here it is. This is the actual tablet, etched with that spiky cuneiform script. And what's just mind-blowing is how it weaves together something sacred with something super practical. It starts out as this beautiful, poetic song, but it's also a detailed, step-by-step guide to brewing beer.
So, who was this Ninkasi? She was the Sumerian goddess of beer. But she wasn't just some distant patron saint, To the Sumerians, her divine spirit was literally in the beer. She was both the brewer and the brew. Her name even means the lady who fills the mouth. Pretty cool, huh?
So the hymn actually walks you through the whole process, which the priestesses would sing while they worked. First, they'd make this special beer bread called bapir, flavoring it with honey and dates. Then they'd prepare the malted barley. Finally, they'd mix it all together in water, and the wild yeast just floating in the air would kick off that magical transformation we call fermentation.
And listen, we're not talking about some gritty, crude sludge here. To prove it, back in 1989, a brewery in San Francisco actually followed the hymn's recipe. And the result was this incredibly sophisticated drink. They said it had the smoothness and the bubbly fizz of champagne, with this amazing aroma of dates.
Okay, so we've got the recipe, but who is actually drinking this champagne-like beer? And, maybe even more important, who was making it? This divine drink was at the heart of a culture that looked way different from what we might expect.
And this is the part that changes everything. In Sumerian society, brewing was women's work. From the family home all the way up to the temples, the first brewmasters were women. And it doesn't stop there. The first tavern keepers, also women, running their own businesses in a thriving economy.
We actually get a peek into this world from their art. This little cylinder seal shows a really common scene. You don't see people with their own individual mugs. Nope, you see a whole group sharing from one big jar, drinking together through these long straws. Beer was a social glue. It literally brought people together.
And this wasn't just for the everyday person either, not by a long shot. I mean, just look at this thing. It's a drinking straw made of solid gold, and it was found in the tomb of a super powerful Sumerian queen named Puabi. It's over 4,500 years old. This tells you that drinking beer was a high-status, even royal thing to do.
Okay, so we gotta clear something up. For centuries, a lot of really biased translations created this huge myth that these female-run taverns were basically brothels. The reality couldn't be more different. They were totally legitimate businesses. In fact, really powerful women, including a special class of priestesses, could own and run them. And when you see laws about them, like in the famous Code of Hammurabi, it's all about regulating fair prices, not policing morality.
So this world run by female brewers, where beer was sacred and communal, it lasted for thousands of years. But then, a series of revolutions came along that would change beer forever.
A shift started.
a really big one that would take brewing out of the home and the temple and move it into the monastery and eventually the factory.
So, the first big change happens back in the Middle Ages. That's when European monks started using hops, which added flavor and, this is the key part, helped preserve the beer. Then the Industrial Revolution just hit fast forward on everything. In London, huge demand from workers gave us the dark porter. Over in Germany, brewers used chilly caves to perfect clean, crisp lagers. And finally, the British Empire's need for a beer that could last a long sea voyage to India, well, that gave us the super hoppy IPA.
So when you boil it all down, two huge things happened. First, brewing got standardized. The goal wasn't unique local flavor anymore. It was all about consistency and making a product that would last on a shelf. And second, as brewing went from a home craft to a giant industry, it became almost completely dominated by men. The world of Ninkasi, it was basically gone.
But you know, history has this funny way of repeating itself, of coming full circle. After about a century of this industrial sameness, something new, or maybe something very, very old, started to bubble up again.
So fast forward to the end of the 20th century, and this is what the global beer market looked like. Just a tiny handful of massive corporations. AB InBev, Heineken, Carlsberg, pretty much controlled everything the world was drinking.
And the result of this whole mass production mindset was the birth of a very specific style of beer, the light American lager. It was designed to appeal to absolutely everyone, which meant it was often made with cheaper stuff like rice and corn to keep costs down and create a super mild, less challenging flavor.
But in the face of all this sameness, a kind of rebellion started brewing, a movement that, probably without even realizing it, started to look a whole lot like the very origins of beer itself. Which brings us to this really wild question. What if the future of beer is actually its past?
I mean, really think about it. The whole modern craft beer movement is about one thing: rejecting standardization. It's about a huge diversity of recipes, playing around with local ingredients, and creating a community hub where people can gather. Sound familiar? It's just like the female-run taverns of ancient Sumer. It's a return to the idea that beer can be so much more than a product. It can be a craft, a way to connect with our own history, and maybe, just maybe, a taste of something divine. It's a return to the spirit of Ninkasi.